as I came into the movement in 2000 as Program Director of Peace Action Wisconsin. She was one of the first people that I met. And it was her personal story that more than intrigued me, that moved me to work deeper in our movement. Such inspiration. Without ado, and we're glad she's here because she's headed back to Afghanistan on Monday. Let's welcome Kathy Kelly.
With what almost might sound like a bedtime story, so if you need to nod off, it's okay. Once upon a time, there was a world where there was no Facebook, there was no internet, there was barely a fax machine, and it was 1991, and I was in Iraq, close to the border between Saudi Arabia and Iraq, with a group called the Gulf Peace Team. We wanted to stand in between the warring parties and say, don't shoot. Well, the war came and we were in Iraq for a substantial chunk of that war. The Iraqis decided we were too anarchistic and it was time to say goodbye. And we were in Jordan and we could still go back into Iraq. We got it into our heads that we should have convoys of relief supplies that would go in along the road between Jordan and Iraq. And people from primarily Europe and India and other parts of the world looked at me and said, well, can't you get Brian Wilson over here? And I couldn't, but I've accepted that lot in life. But what I want to say is that back in the day when there wasn't internet and fax and means of communication that we're so familiar with, back in the day, Brian Wilson's charisma and story had gone across many, many borders. Borders that we want to see blur, borders we want to see disappeared. We are 6% of the world's population. In 94% of the world's population, and who knows, maybe amongst many beings in the world that aren't human, there is a deep desire to be in solidarity with who you are and what you do today. I want to fast forward a bit to another war again in Iraq. And this time, I and what we call the Iraq Peace Team were in Baghdad. And the shock and awe campaign, the bombing campaign was shocking, and it was awful. We were in the Al-Fanar Hotel when the Marines came in, coming along Sharia Abu Nuwas, a long, long parade of armored personnel carriers, Humvees, Jeeps, bulldozers, and they all parked right outside our hotel. And again, you know, the technology on our side wasn't that great. We had an old tape recorder, the kind where you thwack the button. But it came over us that we should play music. And so some of you would know the song from Leonard Cohen's anthem. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Ring the bell that still can ring. And that's what we played along with Les Miserables and Phantom of the Opera as the Marines arrived in front of the Al-Fanar Hotel in Baghdad when the war certainly hadn't ended. But I want to say those lines again from Leonard Cohen. Ring the bell that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. If we wait till we're perfect, we'll wait a very long time. We're fragile people. We're not machines. But we are alive and kicking and doing well and doing good, and we are oh so needed at this particular crucial junction in history. And there is a solidarity with us, much as there was with Brian Wilson, when people who would never be able to meet him or shake his hand nevertheless asked, can't you send Brian Wilson over here? But I want to go a little more deeply into that idea of forgetting our perfect offering. I think we need to be about the further invention of nonviolence. And it requires practice, practice, practice. And it requires constantly devising ways to develop non-cooperation with the military system, with the national security system. It's hard for me to get that phrase out. Constant withdrawal of consent, constant education, education, education. But it's not as though we don't have rudders, if you will. And I think a number one rudder, it's foolproof, is to always commit to believing and acting on the basis that the number one priority must always be the most impoverished. In our midst, in our world, the number one priority. When we make the most impoverished people the number one priority, so many other things fall into place. So I'd like to just give you a quick anecdote from my most recent trip to Afghanistan. Gulumai is the youngest amongst the Afghan peace volunteers, and so it fell to him to haul the trash to the trash collector. And it's a bad job because the roads are all broken and uneven and the streets are crowded, and it's sort of humiliating if he meets school friends or anyone really on the road, and the wheelbarrow might tip over. And he's a young Hazara boy. 4 Pashto boys on bicycles, young ones, stopped him. And they said, look, we're on our way to the trash dump also, but you could make our lives easier. Could we go through your trash and see if we can find some collectibles, and that will make our day easier before we get to the trash. And so Gulumai said, yes. And so the young trash collectors went through our bags of trash, and they pulled out pieces of stale bread and pieces of paper that could be used for fuel. And as they were hard at work, they pointed at what we sometimes refer to as a poppy palace, a big, huge, colorful, ostentatious building, built, no doubt, by a drug lord or a warlord, sometimes with money that comes to them through the United States military, paying bribes, really, to use roadways. But at any rate, they have loads and loads of money. And the young trash collector said, see how those people in that castle live, and look at how we live. And soon those young trash collectors will be going through the trash of the US military bases. $7 billion worth of the mine-resistant anti-personnel carriers will be smelted down, and the melted down iron will be sold on the markets of Kabul, because the United States said, well, we don't really want those machines anymore, and it's too much to transfer them out of the country. We don't want someone else to get them, so we'll just take blowtorches to them. And it'll cost another $7 billion to truck out the supplies that the United States does want. Incredible waste. A $34 million building was just built in Kandahar, and now the US is saying, well, actually, we've just furnished it, we finished it off, but we don't want to give that to someone else, so we'll bulldoze it. $34 million is chump change, I know, when you think about the Pentagon. But $34 million on the streets of Chicago, $34 million to invest in education here in Madison instead of cutbacks, cutbacks, cutbacks. And so putting the most impoverished first could help us so much with our decision making. The second rudder, if you will, is to really believe that nonviolence can change the world. Do you know, before I came here, friends from Singapore and Afghanistan on a Skype phone call knew about people getting arrested at the Madison sing-alongs. Please, after this gathering, don't miss Regis Tremblay's film on Jeju Island. Nonviolence can change the world, and we have such fine exemplars of people using nonviolence. Nonviolence can change the world. We see it with the Los Indignados in Spain, with the activists in Brazil who are protesting because of rises in bus fare, Chilean students protesting because of tuition hikes. There are so many people all around the world involved in this further invention of nonviolence. And so we have plenty of solidarity and plenty of need for our further inventions, and certainly we're finding it in the environmental movement. Some of the greatest catastrophes that humankind will ever face may be coming around the corner. And so there's every good reason to have all hands on deck, powered by, fueled by real belief that nonviolence can change the world, and the world is so in need of that nonviolence now. And then the third rudder, if you will, never let inconvenience get in the way of acting in accord with your deepest beliefs. To my left, never let inconvenience get in the way of acting in accord with your deepest beliefs. And in front of me, all of you, people who have followed that maxim day in, day out for many, many, many years, to be very proud of having bequeathed your example to so many other people. So I'd like to offer a video of the Afghan Peace Volunteers. I suppose when people ask me, as they often do, well, what keeps you going? Isn't it kind of in decades now? And my soundbite answer is, I fall in love easily. They have since welcomed seamstresses who couldn't feed their children because of their own impoverishment to come into their own living space. And the seamstresses, helped by so many of you, created 2,000 duvets, the heavy coverlets, which were then distributed by the young people, young girls and boys, going up the mountainside because the widows get pushed up the mountains. And they distributed 2,000 of those so that people would have some protection against the very harsh winter. The seamstresses are also making these blue scarves, so if anybody would like to pick up one of those, see me, or there are a few out in the hallway. But these kinds of ways of reaching across borders, kind of being border-free, continue to be generated. And they're happening all around this hall and this convention. I want to especially mention Megan Rice and Michael Wally and Greg Nar Obed Birche. They're facing for the Transform Now Plowshares action a sentencing which could put them away for a very, very long time in U.S. prisons. And so to ask the judge to please enact a downward departure from the sentencing guidelines. And the judge can do this. You know, these postcards would help encourage the judge to do so. All you need to do is sign it, and I'll be glad to put the stamps on them if you bring them back to the table in the lobby, but to urge Judge Thaper to enact a downward departure. I'm wearing an orange ribbon, and Cynthia Papermaster gave it to me. She's fasting along with others who have completed the fast and are continuing to support the fasting. Thank you so much in relation to Guantanamo. And may I also say how grateful I am to all those who have helped us become part of the Gaza's ARC project and kind of new invention of, if you will, the further invention of bringing freedom from a terrible siege that's been imposed on the people of Gaza. Thank you, Anne, and all of the other people. I see Medea way back there in the back, and so many people have given life and breath to that extremely important project. Buddy Bell is in Afghanistan now, and I'll kind of switch places with him. I leave on Monday, as George said. And then when we get back, we're going to do an interstate tour. I just realized, listening to Medea's speech given at the New York Catholic Worker, which is on YouTube. Now I know the eschaton is coming when the Catholic Worker is putting things up on YouTube. But thank you, Medea. And I just learned that she finished a tour across upstate New York, but it's a very important place for us to all be focusing, because that's one of the many places in Hancock Field, for instance, where the drones are being operated, these symbols, ugly, terrible symbols of the 21st century military. So Buddy and I will be doing a tour, and I just want to offer this as a suggestion of the kind of thing you might think of. You know, we've all been doing the penny poles. We're going to take with us a bean pole and haul it on Amtrak and Greyhound buses. But the idea is to take your handful of beans and encourage people in town squares and plazas to cast their beans. What do you want? More ongoing waste and destruction and cruelty of war, remembering that war isn't over when it's over? Or do you want to pay reparations? It's the right thing to do. Pay reparations for the suffering caused. And we will surely recommend the abolition of war. I'm pretty grateful for being geographically in sort of a center spot in the United States, so that for decades now people have passed through my home who are among some of the finest people in the world. And we just said goodbye to Ben Griffin and Michael Lyons and Les Gibbons, and it was great then to say hello to them again here. But I was entrusted with a line that I hope many of you have heard this weekend, that Ben Griffin had said, he said that one of the things that kind of put him on the path of questioning what he was doing was to ask the question, how would the people I was facing feel? Thinking about the so-called enemy. How do the people we are facing feel? And so, entrusted with that question, with this certainty that we are all part of one another, with the very real possibility that we can love our enemies, but unfortunately in this country many times those who are practicing enmity are the people who are in the highest positions of power and corporatocracy in our country. We must figure out how to lovingly approach that enmity, love our planet, love all the beings on the planet, love one another, trust in love, and we can build a better world. Thank you.